All right, let's unpack this. Imagine just one person whose influence, stretched across fashion, politics, celebrity for nearly 4 decades,
Like,
basically shaping how the world sees itself. What happens when an era defined by that person starts to, well, transition? Today, we are diving deep into exactly that kind of moment. The really significant, profound shift around Anna Wintour and, of course, Vogue.
yeah, and what's really fascinating here is we've got this compelling perspective from Marc Abergel. He's a luxury executive based over in Paris. His article is called After Anna, How Vogue Can Remain the Custodian of Style in the Next Era. And it just came out today, June 28th, 2025. Gives a really incisive look at this moment.
Right. So our mission today is to dive deep into Abergel's insights. We want to understand not just what's changing, but really why it matters so much. And, what it suggests about the future of cultural authority in this world that's just evolving so incredibly fast. We're looking to pull out those key nuggets that really make you think. So let's set the scene for this.
Well, monumental transition. Anna Wintour's 37 years at Vogue, that's just incredible. Abergel describes her stepping back now as more than a transition. He actually calls it the quiet closing of a chapter. And he makes his point that her influence wasn't seasonal, like trends coming and going. It was structural, deep.
Yeah, it was baked in.
Which raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? In an age where everything feels so temporary, can anyone actually build that kind of structural influence now? Or was Wintour, a product of a completely different time? That's a great question, because her impact, well, it was groundbreaking right from the very beginning. Abergel points to her first cover back in '88. Super radical. It was a model in faded jeans, but with a, $10,000 LaCroix jacket. He says that wasn't just a cover, it was basically a manifesto. She fused street with couture, accessibility with aspiration, high culture with instinct, and right then, Vogue stopped being just another glossy magazine. It became, as he puts it, a compass for how culture saw itself. It's honestly hard to imagine one single image having that kind of power today.
You're absolutely right. That's so true. And the article really hammers home that Wintour's role went way beyond just, editing. He calls her the minister of culture, of style, of curated power. Think about that. Minister of culture. Her covers weren't just filled, they were orchestrated. Her pages didn't just follow trends, she dictated them. She literally turned Vogue into a kind of diplomatic channel between fashion, politics, celebrity, even soft power. So it's no surprise, like Abergel notes, that presidents courted her, actors maybe feared her a bit, luxury titans wanted her advice, and designers, they often credit her with building their entire careers. The power she had was just absolutely.
And the timing of her exit makes it even more interesting. She's stepping down at this really critical moment. The article points out it's just as the old rules of taste collapse under the weight of TikTok, as AI dismantles the role of the editor, and as Gen Z declares independence from the gatekeepers.
Wow. Talk about timing.
Exactly. Abergel says she's making space with characteristic grace. But, and this is important, while she's stepping down from the U.S. job, she is continuing to oversee content globally. He even mentioned that recent BBC News report where King Charles apparently asked if she'd stop working, and she just said, firmly no.
Firmly no. Love that.
Right. So the challenge, as Abergel frames it, is this. If Vogue wants to continue being the Ministry of Culture, how do they find another devil that wears Prada?
It's such a powerful analogy, isn't it? That idea of one single, almost, well, formidable figure shaping a whole world. It really is. And that analogy perfectly sets up what Abergel gets into next. I mean, one of his most compelling points is how Anna Wintour didn't just edit a magazine. He argues she curated a worldview.
Right.
In this age of just, algorithmic chaos, she stood for deliberate curation.
Deliberate curation, yeah.
While everyone else was scrambling to catch trends, she was setting them. Vogue, under her, wasn't just pumping out content. It was, like he says, a court of taste. A sovereign place where fashion, power, and meaning all came together. That feels almost rebellious today, doesn't it?
It really does, and this taps into her unique understanding of what leadership in fashion means. Wintour believed to light in fashion is to guard culture.
Yeah.
And she ran things with, well, the precision of a diplomat. Every single choice.
Every cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every cover, every photo spread, every Met Gala guest list. These weren't just editorial things. Abergel calls them geopolitical acts of soft power.
Geopolitical acts. Wow.
She really elevated the magazine's role beyond anything you normally think of for publishing.
And nothing shows this taste as diplomacy idea better than the Met Gala, right? Abergel calls it her native.
Hey, no, yeah.
Not just a party, but a platform. It became the stage for values, identity, aesthetic codes. Under her, you saw couture met climate change, identity met elegance, celebrity met symbolism, fashion met dandyism.
Mm.
He even gives that great example, the 2025 Black Dandy theme, pointing to Coleman Domingo, AAP Rocky, Lewis Hamilton, Farrell. It was always about more than just the dresses or the suits. It makes you wonder how much of the global cultural chat today happens on platforms like that instead of, the traditional news cycle.
Absolutely. And her philosophy carried over into what Abergel calls icons over algorithms. She consistently picked cover figures not by following taste, but by preceding it. Just think about it. Michelle Obama, way before the polls really showed her full popularity.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris in Converse sneakers before campaign season really hit its stride. Serena Williams, pregnant, such a powerful statement. Beyoncé, presented as completely sovereign. She didn't follow the crowd. The article emphasizes she taught the whole industry to lead with narrative intuition.
It sounds almost like she could see the future, doesn't it? But I wonder, maybe sometimes she was just incredibly plugged into emerging taste rather than purely dictating it.
That's a fair point. Maybe a bit of both.
Either way, it meant Vogue, under Wintour, operated like a fortress, not a feed. As other media just fragmented into, chaos and chasing clicks, Wintour held the line. She kept Vogue not just relevant, but revered, a cultural canon in an era of content saturation. She maintained the borders, which is what Aber says is true cultural sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, The Devil Wears Prada painted a certain picture, didn't it? A famously tough one. But Abergel makes this great point. She wasn't liked by everyone, and that was never the point. She stood for something.
That's key.
It's funny, that movie created such an image. But Abergel's insight flips it being liked wasn't the goal. It makes you think, in today's world of social media likes, how many leaders would actually dare to be unpopular for a vision?
It's a really bold stance, for sure. And it all loops back to her ultimate goal. As Abergel puts it, Wintour governed Vogue not as a magazine, but as a state.
As a state.
Yeah, meaning it had its own rules, its own authority, like a separate cultural nation almost, defining culture, defining meaning, actively stopping it from becoming just, a content mill. She built, he says, a state not of fashion, but of meaning. And her departure, he warns, doesn't just leave a leadership gap. It leaves a vacuum of editorial sovereignty.
Okay, so if that's the scale of what she built, what does this actually mean for Vogue's future now, navigating this post-Wintour world? Abergel gives a pretty stark warning here. He says if Vogue becomes a platform chasing virality, it forfeits its power to create it.
Exactly.
He says if it confuses clicks with meaning, it becomes just another swipe. That's actually quite a scary thought for such a huge institution.
He definitely doesn't hold back. The article points out the dangers he's already seeing in the wider fashion world. We're seeing signs, he says. Fashion weeks reduced to influencer carousels, creators outnumbering critics, and content flattening into style with no soul.
Style with no soul. Ouch.
Yeah. The core problem, he argues, is that the algorithm is loud, but the editor is absent. Wintour's real genius wasn't just who she put in the magazine, but crucially, what she kept out. Her choices defined the state of culture. And that role, Abergel says, you can't just reduce it to a job title. It's about being a custodian of aesthetic sovereignty.
Which leads to this really crucial tension, right, between what might be tempting for Vogue now versus what's actually needed. There must be this huge pull for Condé Nast to appoint someone, digitally native, someone fluent in the algorithms who gets Gen Z, makes business sense, maybe.
On the surface, sure.
But Abergel hits back hard with this counter-argument. Vogue doesn't need a metrics manager. It needs a culture shaper.
Precisely. This leader they need. They have to understand that shaping culture is not about speed, but about stance. They need someone who edits not for the scroll, but for the decade. Abergel really stresses that Wintour didn't just edit fashion. She orchestrated meaning.
Orchestrated meaning, I like that.
Yeah. Her genius wasn't just spotting trends, it was frame setting, making Vogue not just a magazine, but that ministry of culture.
Yeah.
The person who follows her, he insists, has to do the same thing. But for this new world we're in, this isn't just about handing over the content reins. It's the transfer of a cultural throne.
Okay, so let's really unpack Abergel's mandate for the future then. Because he's adamant the next editor-in-chief has to stop thinking in headlines and start thinking in heritage. What Vogue needs now, he says, isn't just another head of content. It's a Cultural sovereign, someone who
Nice.
has that ultimate independent authority over taste and meaning. A
Yeah.
figure who gets what Wintour knew instinctively, that leading Vogue means shaping what the world sees, what it values, what it aspires to.
And he actually lays out 4 key qualities for this cultural sovereign. First, a defender of narrative capital. Understanding that storytelling power, owning the narrative, is way more valuable than just chasing clicks.
Okay.
Second, a curator of long-term desire. Trends fizzle out, he says. Vogue needs to get back to shaping decade-long aspirations, not just what's hot right now.
Right, the long view.
Third, a steward of identity, not just image. Wintour helped define elegance, not just how it looked. That torch needs carrying forward into whatever the next cultural frontier is.
Makes sense.
And finally, they need to be a strategist of cultural sovereignty in the age of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, when machines can style outfits, write captions, maybe even articles, the big question is, who owns the meaning? Next editor has to make damn sure it's Vogue.
That really broadens the job description, doesn't it? Abergel suggests this person maybe should not be a magazine veteran, but a cultural synthesizer. Someone who can move easily across different fields. Fashion, movies, music, art. Understanding that style isn't just visual. It's emotional, it's symbolic, it's social. This person needs to be able to convene worlds, not just cover them. Treat Vogue like a cultural ministry, not just a media brand. It's like they need a polymath, not just an editor.
Exactly. So their fluency, Abergel argues, won't be in like publishing KPIs or social media numbers. It'll be in myth-making, aesthetic conviction, and the curation of desire.
Yeah.
This isn't an editor in the old sense. It's a conductor of meaning. They won't just be managing covers. They'll be curating cultural power. And Abergel concludes, look, this isn't just a succession moment for Vogue. It's truly an existential one.
Wow. Yeah, this deep dive today really hammers home Abergel's main point. Vogue's future, it really rests on whether it can hold on to its cultural authority.
Indeed. As the article puts it so well, cultural authority is the rarest currency in this age where we're just drowning in content.
Yeah.
Abergel suggests Vogue must not become faster. It must point the way. Fashion isn't a stream. It's a stance.
It's a stance. That's powerful. And the deep dive today leaves us with this really compelling thought. If Anna Wintour truly curated culture itself, like Marc Abergel argues, then as she steps back, the real question for you to think about is, in this world just saturated with fleeting trends and algorithms pushing content, who, or maybe what, is going to guard and define cultural coherence in the next era?